In a moment that seemed like the end, an extraordinary beginning unfolded. The death of Jesus upon the cross marks a profound event in human history, a juncture where faith, frailty, and God's promises met the chaos of a troubled world. What transpired in those hours and the days that followed were moments charged with a timeless depth, events that beckoned humanity to grapple with its own imperfections and gaze upon the possibilities of divine grace. This reflection on the 5 miraculous occurrences that followed Jesus' death invites us to explore the intricate web of human fragility, God's unwavering promise, and the yearning for peace amidst enduring conflict. 1. The tearing of the temple veil, a promise fulfilled. The veil of the temple, a sacred barrier that separated humanity from the Holy of Holies, where God's presence was said to dwell, was torn in two at the very moment Jesus surrendered his spirit. This was no mere fabric. It was a thick and imposing curtain, a tangible symbol of the profound separation between humanity and the divine. It was a symbol of human separation from God, of frailty, limitations, and the distance caused by sin. Yet, as the veil tore from top to bottom, a promise that had long been whispered through prophets came to life, that God in his love desires closeness to all people, no matter their brokenness. This was not a gentle tear. It was a deliberate and dramatic act, a divine intervention that tore through the barriers that had kept humanity apart from the divine presence. The human condition is one marred by division, barriers between nations, between faiths, between hearts, and even within our own selves. The tearing of the veil is God's declaration that such divisions need not endure. By Jesus' sacrifice, the sacred was no longer confined. The invitation was extended to all. The frailty that once required mediation by a high priest was replaced by a divine bridge, one paved by compassion and sacrifice. This act calls us today to dismantle the barriers that separate us, to see others as deserving of love, of grace, and of our fellowship, regardless of differences. It reminds us that faith is not about exclusion, but about inclusion. The veil being torn was a revolutionary moment, one that shattered the old notions of restricted access to God. It invites us to a relationship with God that is intimate, personal, and unencumbered by ritualistic formalities. 2. The earthquake and the shattering of foundations. Following Jesus' final breath, the earth itself quaked. Rocks split and tombs opened, as if nature itself reeled in response to the death of the divine. This was no ordinary earthquake, for its tremors reached not only the land but also the foundations of human understanding. It was as if the whole of creation was groaning in response to the weight of what had occurred. The Creator had died, and the world responded with a visceral upheaval. It was a sign that the old ways, dominated by death, sin, and the weight of human frailty, had been shaken to their core. The earthquake reminds us of the unpredictability of life and the conflicts that continue to unsettle the world today. It challenges us to consider our own foundations. What do we cling to? What structures do we build, and are they truly aligned with God's vision of justice and peace? The tremors of that day were not just physical, they were spiritual, shaking the old systems of power and oppression. The breaking of the earth calls us to let go of that which binds us in darkness and instead embrace the promise of something new, something that rises from the rubble with greater strength and purpose. In our contemporary world, we see the echoes of this earthquake in the societal and personal upheavals that demand change. The divisions that lead to conflict, the injustices that cry out for redress, all are reminders that the old order must be shaken for something new to emerge. Just as the earthquake on that day signaled a fundamental shift, so too must we be willing to let the ground beneath us be shaken, to allow God's transformative power to work through us, reshaping the world in accordance with his love and justice. 3. The resurrection of saints, a foretaste of reconciliation. Amidst the chaos, tombs were opened, and many holy people who had passed were resurrected and appeared in Jerusalem. This extraordinary vision of saints once dead, now alive, was more than a miracle. It was a profound statement of hope, of restoration, and of God's promise that death would not have the final word. The resurrection of these saints was a glimpse of what is to come, when the fullness of God's kingdom brings unity and life, where death no longer reigns. Imagine the astonishment of those who witnessed their loved ones, long dead, walking among them. The resurrection of the saints was not merely a spectacle. It was a deeply personal encounter for those who experienced it. It was a moment that transcended grief and brought healing, a moment when the past and present met in a profound embrace. It was God's way of showing that his power over death was not limited to Jesus alone, but extended to all who believe. These resurrected saints walked among their loved ones, their presence a witness to the transformative power of God's love. Love that seeks reconciliation, not just with him, but among his people. The challenge set before us is to be agents of reconciliation, to seek the restoration of broken relationships, to forgive, and to extend grace. It is a call to believe that the power which raised the saints can also breathe new life into our communities, our families, and our nations. In a world fraught with division, where conflicts arise from misunderstandings, prejudices, and the inability to forgive, the resurrection of the saints calls us to a higher standard. It calls us to believe in the possibility of new beginnings, to trust that no relationship is beyond redemption, and to work towards reconciliation even when it seems impossible. It is a reminder that God's power is not just about individual salvation, but about the healing of entire communities. 4. The centurion's proclamation, faith in the face of power. Among the most profound moments was the Roman centurion's proclamation. This soldier, hardened by countless executions, found himself trembling. The centurion and those with him declared, surely he was the Son of God, a revelation that transcended their allegiance to the empire. Here was a man steeped in authority, brought face to face with a greater power, the power of sacrificial love. The centurion's transformation stands as a powerful testimony. Faith can be found in the most unexpected places. Those who hold power, those who are part of systems that perpetuate division or suffering, are not beyond the reach of God's grace. For a Roman centurion, a symbol of the occupying force, of oppression, and of the power of the state, to acknowledge Jesus' divinity was nothing short of revolutionary. It was a moment of vulnerability, of seeing beyond the uniform and the authority to the deeper truth that lay before him. It reminds us today of the courage it takes to recognize truth, even when it challenges the structures that sustain our own lives. His declaration is a call to every heart, urging us to let our humanity take precedence over power, to let our faith be greater than our fears, and to acknowledge the divine even in the midst of conflict. The centurion's words echo across time, reminding us that no heart is too hardened, no position too powerful, that it cannot be touched by the love of God. In contemporary society, where power often corrupts and blinds us to the needs of others, the centurion's proclamation is a powerful reminder of the importance of humility. It challenges those in positions of authority to use their power not for oppression, but for the good of others, to recognize the humanity in those they serve, and to be open to the transformative power of love and grace. 5. The resurrection of Jesus, the triumph of hope. The resurrection of Jesus on the third day is the crowning event, the triumph over death, sin, and human frailty. The stone was rolled away, and with it, the hopelessness that often accompanies human suffering. The empty tomb is a testament to God's providence, a beacon of hope that pierces through the darkness of despair. It is the ultimate victory, the moment when all that Jesus had promised came to fruition. Jesus' resurrection is not just a story of long ago. It is a continuing promise that speaks to our lives today. In a world that still grapples with pain, division, and uncertainty, the resurrection is a reminder that these are not the final word. God's love and grace have the power to transform even the darkest of nights into dawn. It invites us to rise, to believe that hope is alive, and to take part in the divine story of healing, unity, and new beginnings. The resurrection calls us to live as people of hope, to carry within us the assurance that no matter how dire the circumstances, God's power is greater. It challenges us to confront the darkness in our own lives, to trust in God's ability to bring light and to be bearers of that light to others. The resurrection is not just about eternal life after death, it is about the new life that begins here and now, a life marked by love, by justice, and by a commitment to the well-being of all. The events that follow Jesus' death carry a deep spiritual truth, that even in our most vulnerable moments, God's promises endure. They urge us to tear down the veils in our own lives, to trust that broken foundations can be rebuilt, and to believe that hope can rise from the most desolate of places. They remind us that every heart, no matter how hardened, can be transformed by love. As you reflect on these events, consider the barriers in your life that may need to be torn away. Think of the relationships that need reconciliation, the moments that require courage to speak truth, and the hope that can bring light to your struggles. Let these moments from history inspire you to draw nearer to God's grace and to live in the freedom and hope that Jesus' death and resurrection provide. May you be encouraged by the knowledge of God's providence. May faith guide you, and may love be the force that unites us all in a shared journey towards peace, unity, and reconciliation. Let this reflection be a stepping stone for your own story, one where hope is tangible and God's presence is a constant, guiding light. May you find strength in your frailty, courage in your fear, and faith that moves you to embrace the fullness of God's promises. Engage with this text, not as a distant story, but as an invitation to live a life transformed by grace, where every moment is an opportunity to draw closer to the divine and to each other. As we bring this reflection to a close, let us remember that the story of Jesus' death and resurrection is more than a historical account. It is a living testament that continues to speak to us today. It reminds us that God's promises endure beyond our weaknesses, that His love reaches into our darkest moments, and that His power can transform our lives in ways we cannot even imagine. Let us step forward in faith, confident in the knowledge that we are never alone. God walks beside us through every trial, triumph, and challenge we face. May we live each day with the hope that the resurrection brings, knowing that our lives are part of a greater narrative, one authored by the Creator Himself, who calls us to love, to serve, and to bring His peace into the world. Take these moments of reflection as an invitation to deepen your connection with God. Let your life bear witness to His grace, becoming a beacon of hope in a world yearning for light. Walk in His love, share His message, and find joy in every step of the journey ahead, trusting in His divine providence. Amen. Thank you for joining us in this reflection. If this message has inspired or encouraged you, please share it with others who might benefit from its words. Together, let us build a community rooted in hope, faith, and love. Follow our page for more reflections, and let us continue this journey side by side, supporting one another as we draw closer to God and to each other.